The Picture of Dorian Gray is a novel that centers on Dorian Gray, a beautiful yet susceptible young man who has recently inherited a fortune. The setting is London in the 1800s, better known as the Victorian Age. At the beginning of the novel, we see Dorian arrive in London, where he quickly meets a friend named Basil Hallward. Basil, a painter, becomes fixated on capturing the beauty of Dorian through painting. This painting of Dorian is set to be Basil's masterpiece. Next, Dorian meets another man named Lord Henry, who is almost the opposite of Basil. Lord Henry is completely transfixed on pleasure-seeking, and practices it while mocking those who attempt to alleviate human suffering. Lord Henry is a twisted person. He tells Dorian that he should enjoy his youth and seek out all the pleasure he can. Lord Henry remarks to Dorian that although he is beautiful now, it will all fade through time. When Basil finishes his portrait of Dorian, it immediately begins to serve as a reminder that even though the painting of Dorian will remain beautiful, Dorian himself will grow old and lose his youthful beauty. Having been influenced by Lord Henry, Dorian makes the wish that the painting would bear the toll of time and sin instead of him. In exchange, he offers his soul. Interestingly, Basil's view is the opposite as Lord Henry. He embraces the outlook that beauty is so breathtaking because it doesn't last. It's not something to cling to. Next, Dorian meets Sybil Vane, whom he falls in love with. Due to his newfound love, Dorian rejects Lord Henry's philosophy of hedonism or pleasure-seeking. Then, Dorian, Henry, and Basil all head to the theater to watch a play in which Sybil is acting. However, Sybil's performance is horrible, and Henry and Basil end up leaving. Because of her real love for Dorian, she has no interest in playing the characters of the plays. She decides to quit acting. Dorian promptly rejects her, believing that he had fallen in love not with her, but with her acting. He meanly tells Sybil that he never wants to see her again. After a night of wandering, he goes home and sees that the portrait has developed an ugly sneer. Repulsed by this, Dorian realizes that he wants to apologize to Sybil the next day. However, it's too little too late, as Sybil committed suicide that night. The sadistic Lord Henry twists the meaning of Sybil's death. He convinces Dorian to view her suicide as an artistic expression of love, and not to be sad about it. The portrait becomes more grotesque with every sin that Dorian commits, which motivates him to hide the painting. Next, Dorian becomes entranced when he starts reading a yellow book about a young Parisian who spends his life seeking out pleasure. Dorian has the book bound in 12 different colors to match his varying moods. As he continues to see the painting age, he becomes worried about someone breaking into his home and stealing it. As he's been living his scandalous lifestyle, he's acquired a lot of enemies who would like to expose Dorian, if only they knew the truth. Years had passed when Basil sees Dorian on the street. Basil tries to bring him back to the proverbial light side. He begs Dorian to use his power and influence for good, as opposed to the evil that he's been using it for. Dorian states that he'd like to show Basil his soul, and Dorian leads Basil to the room where he keeps the portrait locked up. Shocked, Basil sees the disgusting and festering version of Dorian in the painting. Stricken with rage from the portrait, Dorian murders Basil. The next morning, Dorian asks for help in disposing of the body from Alan Campbell, who is a scientist and former close friend. Campbell refuses at first, but eventually agrees to help Dorian when he is blackmailed. In the next scene, Dorian attends a party which he finds rather boring. That night, he decides to go to an opium den. Instead of facing his sins, he commits himself to forgetting them through drug abuse. After leaving the opium den, he is followed by a man who turns out to be Sybil's brother, James. James is seeking revenge. However, Dorian tricks James into believing that he's not Dorian, as he has the face of a 20-year-old, and roughly 18 years had passed since Dorian and Sybil's relationship. But later, James learns from a lady at the opium den that it was in fact Dorian, and that he simply doesn't age. Next, Dorian is entertaining guests at his country estate. However, he becomes ill when he sees the face of James outside. Although at first he locks himself up in his house to avoid James, he eventually goes on a hunting trip. A man is accidentally shot, and it turns out to be James, to Dorian's relief. Dorian is then speaking with Lord Henry, and hints that he had killed Basil. Speaking aloud, Dorian wonders whether he can change. He notes that earlier he had not taken advantage of a young innkeeper's daughter. However, when he goes to check the painting to see if it had helped, the painting is even worse. Now it has grown a look of cunning and a wrinkle of a hypocrite. Frustrated, he stabs the heart of the painting. Dorian Gray becomes the grotesque and festering man from the painting, while the painting reverts to its original beauty. Dorian Gray lies dead on the floor with a sword in his heart.